as being less of an impact or less burdensome compared to caregivers who have lower levels of optimism. And then low optimism has also been associated with greater levels of depression for or among caregivers. This shouldn't be too much of a surprise, but just kind of points out some of the caregiver factors that can contribute to role strain in particular. Additionally, women who are providing care to an older adult are at increased risk for burden, caregiver burden, role strain, mental health impairments such as depression and anxiety, and they also tend to report a lower quality of life and less subjective well-being in their life. So we don't completely understand why women tend to have a high or at more risk for role strain. Theories suggest that potentially women provide more care overall to multiple others in their life, but some research has also demonstrated that that's not true when following both men and women over a 10-year span, that there was no difference in gender. So we don't completely understand this phenomenon at this point in time, and more research needs to be done to understand why it is that women might experience more strain than men. Regarding spousal relationships and role strain, spousal relationships and also communication tend to change when the couple is dealing with a chronic health condition or a chronic illness. So as you might expect, that the quality of the marriage before the chronic condition comes into play has a lot to do with how well the caregiver adapts and adjusts to managing the chronic illness. So caregivers who share pleasurable activities and share values with the patient and also feel that the love is reciprocated in the relationship tend to experience less global strain. So that means that they perceive providing care to be less burdensome or less challenging. Caregivers, who are in these type of good relationships also tend to report lower levels of tension in the relationship and fewer feelings of being manipulated by the patient or the care recipient. Good relationship quality, however, does not prevent the caregiver from worrying about their ability to continue providing care for the patient. So that's something that is not protected by having a good relationship. They're still very likely to worry about whether or not they can go on providing care for the patient and how well they can continue to provide care. So, and then also pre-existing marital strain can also exacerbate the stress of providing care. So I don't think that that's much of a surprise. But the news here then is really that a good spousal relationship can be a protective factor. Intensity of caregiving has also been demonstrated to have a strong and significant relationship with caregiver distress. So this really supports the wear and tear hypothesis that the number of hours that one is providing care or the number of years will have an impact on how much distress the caregiver experiences. So the longer that the caregiving is sustained, the greater the decline in the caregiver's well-being. Other factors that might contribute to caregiver distress include lost wages if the caregiver stops working to provide care in the home, or if they have a home health aide or a nurse's aide who is providing in-home services. The cost of that might be burdensome. And then also, as I mentioned before, just decreased social interaction if the caregiver is unable to leave the patient unattended or is unable to get out of the home as much as before. So I want to spend some time now talking about some of the care recipient factors. And I know I'm using the word patient and care recipient, so I'm going to probably just out of habit continue to use those words, but I'm referring to the individual and the relationship in the family who has Parkinson's disease. Okay. So in this particular study that looked at caregiver quality of life and caregiver burden, all of these different factors were measured, including care recipient cognitive impairment, care recipient behavioral problems, care recipient functional dependency, so how dependent they were in activities of daily living like bathing and feeding. Also hours of formal services that were received in the home, so that would be having like a home health aide. That was measured as well. And then hours spent providing informal care, so how many hours the family member was providing care. Perceived social support of the caregiver, so to what degree does the caregiver believe that they have support, people that they can turn to. Frequency of caregiver breaks, how often were they getting breaks from providing care. And then caregiver self-esteem and the quality of the relationship between the caregiver and care recipient were also measured. So all of these factors were examined to determine to what extent these had an impact on caregiver quality of life and caregiver burden. And among all of those, only behavioral problems and functional dependency contributed to caregiver burden. So the better the quality of the caregiver-care recipient relationship, the more support the caregiver believed that he or she was receiving, and the more frequent breaks the caregiver could take, the lower the caregiver burden. Higher frequency of breaks was also found to be associated with caregiver quality of life. So burden was more a problem if the caregiver was providing more assistance with activities of daily living like feeding and bathing and grooming, or if the patient had behavioral problems, meaning maybe impulsivity or psychiatric problems, which I'll talk more about in a couple slides. Okay. So given time, I'm just going to flip ahead a few slides. I can just quickly summarize this slide, which just again another sort of meta-analysis or a study of a bunch of different studies looking at to what degree each of these different factors contribute to caregiver burden. And so in this particular study, the motor symptoms and dependency and activities of daily living had the largest influence on caregiver burden. So I also want to spend some time discussing the neuropsychiatric symptoms of a patient and how that can contribute to caregiver burden. So neuropsychiatric symptoms would include things like depression, physical and mental fatigue, apathy, sleep disorders, hallucinations, anxiety, agitation. These are usually most common when an individual with Parkinson's disease also has dementia or is diagnosed with dementia. Individuals with PD and dementia are at more risk for being placed in a nursing facility, and probably this is partially because of caregiver burden, but also that in addition to the neuropsychiatric symptoms, they also are having more difficulty carrying out some of those activities of daily living. So the caregiver then is not only providing assistance with bathing and feeding and toileting and so forth, but then also managing some of the neuropsychiatric symptoms such as agitation and psychosis. So combined, that becomes more burdensome then for the caregiver. I'm going to flip ahead. I know you don't have these in front of you, so it doesn't really matter if I'm telling you that I'm going to fast forward here. I want us to move now into talking about interventions. So what does all of this mean? We have all this research that points to all these different caregiver factors and patient factors and how those factors can contribute to burden or role strain, but now what do we do about that? So delaying and reducing caregiver stress can improve the care for the patients, but also decrease placement outside of the home, decrease placement to nursing or skilled living facilities. So the research shows then that what we need to be targeting are the relationships, so the caregiver's relationship with the patient. And this could be done through support groups or social groups that work on improving the relationship. As a psychologist, typically if I meet with a couple or a family, we spend a lot of time discussing effective communication. So addressing with the caregiver how to more effectively communicate with the patient and to take the patient's perspective at times to understand how they might be interpreting a situation or how they might be experiencing a situation. So developing some empathy for that. And ways to communicate, especially if the individual has dementia as well. So providing very clear, basic steps, not repeating, repeating just the very basic instruction again and again without adding additional steps. So for example, please go get the water, rather than please go get the water and then take out the trash, okay? So very, very basic kind of instructions on how to more effectively communicate, but oftentimes I'll work with the caregiver on those skills, ask them to put that into place then between sessions, and also in the session maybe catch when they might be doing something that we could make a change to. Treatment then also of the neuropsychiatric disturbances can reduce burden, as I mentioned. So if we can treat the psychiatric symptoms, then that might reduce some burden for the caregiver and also decrease disability in patients. Increase frequency of caregiver breaks. So I think the trick in this one is figuring out how to do that. And so whether it be enlisting more family or friends to help provide caregiving in the home, or hiring a home health aide for a couple of hours a day, or several hours per week, whatever is affordable, whatever can be done, but taking those breaks. Because oftentimes what happens when an individual begins to provide care for another family member is that they lose out on their own personal life. And so it's very important in order to reduce caregiver stress and burden to maintain that to as much as possible. So getting some breaks from providing care, getting outside of the home, however that needs to be done. Or taking a respite break, taking a week or a month break if that's available. I mentioned support groups in the previous slide in relationship to relationships, so attending a support group together, but also attending a caregiver support group so that a caregiver can also share their experiences with other caregivers and learn from each other to learn what would be helpful and effective, and learn about resources in the community like this. So when I work with families and patients, part of what we do is also working through some of their expectations about the illness, expectations about long-term care, discussing these sort of worst case scenarios. So meaning, what is it that the patient maybe is most concerned about in regards to their illness or in regards to the individual providing care for them? What is the caregiver most concerned about? Once we get into that, then we can start to do some problem solving, but also just opening that up so that there's a full awareness of what each of the individuals is expecting from the other and what their experience is. Discussing long-term care planning well in advance is important. So from a caregiver perspective, what what are my limitations? When do I feel like I would need the patient to receive, either to move into a nursing facility, or when do I need to get someone else in the house to help out? So discussing limitations so that we don't move into that stress or burden area, but that we can catch it ahead of time. So it's important to have these discussions when things are still going well, when we're still functioning well, so that we know that when we get to a certain point, this is the point that I said, I need some additional help in the home. And I think I already mentioned this one, then discussing expectations about illness and treatment. So I wanted to leave some time for questions, and we can talk more about some of those caregiver interventions as well. But that's just our contact information for Northwest Neurobehavioral Institute. But I'm happy to take questions or comments at this time.
Well, let's start. Thank you very much. We need to talk. Let's start with, we'll go down the alphabet, and let's start with Anchorage, Alaska, Providence Medical Center. How many are there today? And let us know if you have any questions. I saw they checked in. I even saw people. Do you see them? Oh, okay. Well, as usual, when we're going through the list, if I skip you or if you weren't able to get the phone unmuted when I was calling your site, just break in at the end and we'll make sure that we catch you. Billings, Montana, Deaconess Billings Clinic.
We have no questions, and we have 4. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming today. Chewelah, Providence St. Joseph Hospital. Clarkston Tri-State Memorial.
Yeah, hi, we're here, Cindy. We've got 9 today.
Hi, John.
We had one question.
Okay.
It was revolved around travel or availability of places to go travel. For instance, are there tourist services for travelers, or are there spas where you can go, something like a spa where you can go get away that are focused around Parkinson's or caregivers, maybe?
Respite, kind of?
It's an excellent question, and I have a feeling that some of these questions I'm probably not going to be the best one to answer because I'm not aware of all of those types of resources. Typically, respite care, I know that the patient would go to a nursing facility, but you're asking, is there an opportunity then for the caregiver to go to a spa or something like that?
Yeah, something more proactive, maybe.
I'm not aware of any, but as we go through each of the different locations, if anyone else is aware of something like that, please let us know. Typically, when I've worked with families, I recommend taking that time, taking that respite care break to go see family, if this is important to you, to go see family members that you may not have seen in a long time, or do something that you haven't been able to do. Get away, get out of the house for that entire time if possible. But that would be lovely if there's something like that available. I'm not aware of that.
Nope, I am not either, but I'm writing down the question like I do usually, and I'll keep it down as a question as I'm looking through for researching, and if I find something like that, I'll let you know.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody there.
One other quick comment. The person who would probably know the most about those types of resources would be the social worker at your local hospital or facility. So that would be my recommendation in terms of finding out, are there things like this? The social worker might be the best person to ask.
Okay, thank you.
Nurse, care coordinator.
Okay, Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai Medical Center.
We have 11 today, and we do have one question.
Good afternoon. Go ahead.
I was just wondering, how do you separate out cognition issues from the neuropsychiatric relationship and dementia?
So I'm not sure if I will answer this as you're wanting. So I'll give you my first reaction, but let me know if I've answered this or not. So cognitive impairments would be more specific to difficulties with memory. Oftentimes with dementia, there are the experiences of hallucinations. And so you can't really separate the two. In some of the research that I mentioned, I believe that they were studying both individuals with Parkinson's disease who have depression, and then also individuals with Parkinson's disease who have dementia and therefore potential hallucinations and so forth. So I'm curious, was the question more to that particular study or just in general how we separate those?
It was more in general. But I was just struck at the beginning when cognition seemed to be the less stressful. And
Sure.
I find it one of the most stressful, especially in relationship to the neuropsychiatric issues.
Right.
So it's, I mean, how do you define whether it's just cognition or neuropsychiatric?
Right. No, that's a good question. And the studies that I looked at didn't specifically indicate whether or not they had separated out individuals with dementia. I think most of the studies that I initially presented today, when they measured cognitive impairment, they did include individuals with dementia. So that's a good question. Now I'm curious, I kind of want to look back to see to what degree they were measuring that, because I hear what you're saying, that yeah, typically if the neuropsychiatric symptoms are the most problematic or the most burdensome, then how did that not show up in some of those other studies? Or why was that the least significant? Okay, now I'm going to have to look back.
Thank you.
Well, and so I can just write down to have Jill get back to me with that and then get it to your support group leader there in Coeur d'Alene. Would that work?
That works.
Okay. Is that you, Beth?
Thank you.
Beth,
Thank you.
Hi there. Was that Beth that is, sorry.
No.
I don't know if Beth is today.
Yeah, Beth is our leader. She's not here today.
Okay. If I get it to Beth, is that okay?
That'd be perfect.
Okay.
We have 2 more people came in, so now we have 13.
Well, welcome. Thank you for coming, everybody. Okay. Colville, Providence, Mount Carmel.
We have 4 today and no questions at this time.
Thank you. If you come up with a question as we're going through, you can break in at the end. Thank you very much. Dayton General Hospital. Okay, Miles City, Montana. Ooh, you have a good smelling pen.
I know.
Wow.
It's very strong.
Moses Lake, Samaritan Healthcare.
We have 11 people, and right now, no questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Moses Lake. Pendleton, Oregon.
We have 2 and no dog today.
No dog. Welcome back, Sue.
Thank you. It's good to be back. 6 months is a long time.
It's a long time. Again, break in if you do come up with a question. Port Townsend, Jefferson Healthcare. Pullman Regional Hospital.
There's 4 of us here today, and we have no questions.
Thank you for joining us today. Walla Walla, Providence, St. Mary's.
We didn't have telehealth for 3 months as they were remodeling, and this is the first of us getting back, and there are just 2 of us, but I hope that it'll improve by next month.
Shirley, is
Thank
that
you.
Shirley? Whoops. Okay. Well, hopefully that's Shirley, and because she's been calling me. So cool. Hi, Shirley. Okay. Did I miss anybody else on the list?
This is Moses Lake.
Hi, Moses Lake.
Hi. We have 11 present. Do we have any questions? I don't believe so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Spokane.
Okay, Spokane has 33, and have we got any questions? Corrine?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for Thank you for the presentation. I enjoyed the research, and I think you're showing that there's a real interest in caregiver matters. I have a question about your research, and especially in the financial area. It seems to me that one of the problems that caregivers encounter is access to financial information, the kind of struggle over who's doing what with financial information, taking over tax preparation, and a whole set of things that relate to finances, and are not specific. Well, they are specific to the relationship, but not in that physical sense. So I wondered if you had a response to that. But I also just wanted to note that before I get to take your answer on that, I should have done this in reverse, that on the travel matter, I think the gentleman was talking about traveling together as a pair. And I just want to note that my experience is that if you require accessible accommodation, that's generally very difficult to find unless you go to a large city. Otherwise, you may be told it's there, and when you get there, discover that their idea of accessible is not really accessible. But your response to the financial matter.
Yeah. So, if the caregiver is the one who's taking on more of the financial responsibilities within the family, it would be best if those responsibilities began to be transferred when the patient was able to instruct the caregiver on how to go about taking care of all the financial obligations with the home. In terms of getting advice on that, I again would defer to a social worker. Typically, they're more aware of insurance issues, long-term care planning issues, and finances regarding all of that. And in terms of then learning sort of how to begin taking over some of the responsibilities that maybe the patient used to do primarily, a social worker might again be the best source of support for that, or getting support from other friends or family who can instruct the caregiver on how to do that. Did I answer that fully, or was there another piece of that you were curious about?
Well, I was really my first question, part of the question really is, did you cover that in your research?
No, I did not come across that. And that might be because that may not be discussed in sort of the psychological
I'm not
seeing any
side. Research that covered it, and I thought, well, maybe you did. I think it's a forgotten area.
I think you're right, and it could be because the interventions for it maybe are less clear, because it becomes kind of a touchy subject, maybe, or a very personal subject for some people. But I think you're right that typically when someone's taking over the caregiving role, they may also be taking on more responsibility with finances, and that can
very stressful on both sides.
I've certainly had patients who who report that kind of strain, that taking things, trying to just learn what the other individual did or had been doing. That's quite a source of stress. It can be very overwhelming.
And appears at all levels of income.
Yeah, definitely. If I were working with someone individually or a family individually on that issue, I would advise them to, if they have another family member or a close friend who they can accept advice from or accept some instruction from, that would be, as I was saying before, that would be my recommendation.
Just along
or
with
financial
that,
advisor.
Yeah, well, and along with that, what we're working on, because we've had a lot of requests in the last few months, but it's always good information, is one of our telehealths in the next few months is hopefully having one of those elder law, estate planning type of businesses, consultants come in and actually do a telehealth for us. Because for whatever reason, we don't usually end up talking about it until we need it, and we should be talking about it way before we need it. So hopefully we can start that conversation for a lot of people with that here at telehealth. So I'm trying in the next 6 to 8 months trying to get that, and hopefully the sooner than later so that we don't have to wait. But there are, if it's not a family or a family member or friend, there are a few organizations in Spokane that kind of help with that process, and if you get a hold of me at the Resource Center, I can kind of point you through, and then you can pick what works better for you.
You mentioned about frequent breaks important for the health of the caregiver. So are these respite or the daily, breaks that are necessary, are they mainly provided by the private, disability insurance, or what are the community supports for the breaks that you're talking about?
Yeah, the research is focusing on more daily, more regular, more frequent breaks rather than having a week each year or a month each year. And so in terms of support for that, again, all of this kind of comes back to then how many resources are available, financial limitations. And so resources for that would be to hire a home health aide who could come once or once each day, perhaps, for a couple of hours. Are you familiar with any of the home health agencies here?
I am, and then there's I think 2 of them in Spokane, but there's 2 day centers.
Yes.
That you can also take if that works out with your situation. There's day centers. They call them adult daycare, and I don't like using that phrase, so I'm going to call it a day center. But they do have so that you could provide for a few hours or maybe even a full day if it works out in your situation, respite care while they're there being taken care of in a nurse with a nursing certified nursing staff and other individuals that they can interact with. So.
Yeah, the adult day health centers are actually a great setup because they typically provide transportation to and from the center and work on do some physical exercises and activities, some socialization. A lot of times they do music activities and provide lunch. So if an individual is a good fit for something like that, then it's a great program. I'm more familiar with the adult day health centers that one would go to if they have more cognitive impairments, say mild cognitive impairment or dementia. I'm less familiar with whether or not they exist if someone is less impaired.
Cindy or Jill, as I understand it, Washington State Elder Services provides respite care. What can you say about that?
That I don't know very much about what they provide. I know, so that's not the best answer, but if you were to call and ask me about it, I can give you their contact information. But one of the things I do know is when they are providing care that they make an effort towards knowing about who they're serving. They've gotten information from us about Parkinson's disease specifically in our PD 101, and so they're trying to educate themselves as they're working with different individuals with different chronic illnesses. But if you call me, I can get you the number and I can get you in the right direction.
Maybe we should have elder care give us a telehealth.
I'm writing it down.
Working on it to learn about all the different resources that are available.
Thank you. I have a question, and it has to do with signs of depression. So if someone is saying that they have very little sense of purpose and have no initiative, would you consider those signs of depression?
It depends. And I say that just because of some of the symptoms of Parkinson's include that apathy or lack of initiation and initiative. And so it's not necessarily an indicator of depression, but that doesn't mean that it's not treatable in that manner. So sometimes people lose interest in activities when they no longer have things that they feel like they can physically participate in, that they've lost the physical ability to do things that they used to do. And so it might be that finding new activities or things that can bring that joy and meaning back into life again would help improve that. If it doesn't improve with some of those interventions, then it might be more directly related to symptoms of Parkinson's. It gets really sticky just because of the changes with dopamine. The symptoms of depression are very common in Parkinson's, and it's hard to kind of tease that out.
So what kinds of things could someone do to help with that?
Sure.
A caregiver. What could a caregiver
right.
do?
So I think if you know the patient well, it's important to identify what were the things that brought that individual joy in the past. Try those things out if that's possible. If those things are not still possible, how can you tweak them, change them so that they can still experience it in some new way? So if they enjoyed participating in sports in the past, will watching sports bring them pleasure? Or if they enjoyed listening to music in the past, then finding music that they connect with. So finding just new ways to bring those activities back into their life. And so a caregiver really becomes very, very important if a patient is depressed, because they become the one to remind the patient, let's do this. Let's participate in this activity. Let's turn on the music. Let's get out of the house and get some fresh air, whatever it might be. The caregiver can become the one who initiates that. The challenge is whether or not the individual will participate, and I really can't say anything more than to just sort of force it without physical abuse, but get the person to get out. Provide some sort of reward, perhaps. Whatever, we each value something different. So whatever we might value, use that then as a reward, that let's get out and do this. If we get out, then we'll have your favorite meal tonight, or whatever it might be, whatever is specific to each individual. And I was gonna say something else about kind of what you're asking, but really just basic kind of behavioral steps can be effective.
Do you think that would help to talk to a counselor?
Sure, definitely. Yeah. So in terms of counseling, if a patient has dementia, then the counseling happens more with the family members, and teaching the family members how to incorporate these strategies at home. If the patient does not have dementia, then counseling one-on-one with the patient is certainly an option, or as a family would be a good option as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We got any more questions here? Nope.
Parkinson's seems to be a very odd disease. With many of us have different symptoms and progress in different ways. How do you take, you had one slide up there that talked about planning.
Mm-hmm.
How do you plan in light of the stochastic nature of this disease?
Yeah.
And to help me plan,
Mm-hmm.
do you have any feeling for what percentage of Parkinson's people, patients, have caregivers, outside caregivers, and what percentage are relying on family to take care of them?
I don't have the
I mean, how can I plan if I don't know if my chances?
Right, whether or not it's likely. That
I'm
is
trying to plan for my wife,
question.
actually, not
yeah.
me.
Right. No, that's a great question as to, how many individuals with Parkinson's actually need a hired caregiver, how many actually receive caregiving assistance from a spouse or another family member. I think it depends on how advanced the disease is and whether or not they're going to need help at home. And so what percentage at some time in their lifetime over the course of the disease require assistance, I don't know. I think that in terms of planning for it, my words of advice, and as a psychologist, I rarely give direct advice. It's usually trying to guide you to get to that decision. But my real direct advice in all of this is do it now. Do it sooner than later. Because once, if the disease progresses and the patient begins to have cognitive impairments, including dementia, then to be a part of those decisions becomes more problematic. And so it's important to have those discussions when both individuals are really aware of what they want for themselves or what they want for the other person, the caregiver, for instance. And so I would highly recommend having those discussions sooner than later. And they can be as basic as, if all things go well in my life, still, where do I want to be at the end of my life? Do I want to be in my home? Do I want to be in a assisted living facility? In some sort of senior, what's the word I'm trying to think, community? Having those discussions about what's important to you and what's important to the spouse, and taking that into consideration as well, because then if you're the patient and have all these impairments, what effect does that have on the spouse, and how can you come to or the other family member who's providing care, how can you come to some kind of an agreement? And you can do that with therapeutic assistance too, if you need someone else to kind of assist with that.
So with all possible scenarios, we have to discuss that. My father lived to 97 with Parkinson, as clear as a bell. My grandmother died in her late 80s with dementia, speaking Norwegian. So which one do I plan for?
It's a good question.
You know what we plan for? We all plan for that we're all going to get old, and someday we're all going to leave this earth. So we all have to give the gift to our families to plan ahead. That's, I think, the way we need to go. And I'm not certified in anything, but that's just...
Well, not to ask for an entire counseling session or anything, but do you have some sort of encapsulated suggestions for families in the situation where there's mild cognitive impairment or there is dementia, the coping strategies and so on?
Sure. So typically what I recommend is taking some time to monitor the individual's behavior, taking note of what's happening when they become more frustrated. So let me just be clear here. Typically what people have questions about is, how do I manage sort of the irritation or frustrations that come up? And so in regards to that, monitoring their behavior to figure out what kinds of environmental things are triggering that irritation, and then making changes to that environment to eliminate or reduce those things. So if having the TV on while the family is trying to have a discussion, having all that noise and all that stimulation is bothersome, then when you're planning to communicate with the individual, it's turning off the TV, having silence, whatever needs to be done, or finding the time of day that's best for that individual to have to have an important discussion or whatever. Also, as I was describing for the treatment of depression, then also identifying what is helpful and soothing for that individual. So when that person may become frustrated, what would they find relaxing and calming and soothing, and as a caregiver then being the one to implement that. Typically then the communication between family members is the other sort of important area to address in all of that.
Do we have any other questions?
Hello?
Yes. Hello. Can you state where
Yes.
you're, which
Moses Lake.
Moses Lake. Okay, thank you.
This discussion leads me to a person with Parkinson's that should acquire a living will while he's still able to make the decisions, or he'll find himself somebody that he might not want making decisions for that person.
This is Courtelaine, and one of the things I just wanted to mention is that we have in our area something called Senior Companions, and it's a program through our local health department, and it's free to the individual, and it would work for like respite care, somebody to come in once a week, give you a break, that kind of thing. And so you might check with your local health departments to see if anybody else has that. And the other thing that I would suggest is when you're dealing with someone with cognitive impairment and you want to know how to handle it, visit your Alzheimer's Association, because they have a lot of education and classes on how to do that.
That's a great suggestion, and here in Spokane we share a suite with the Alzheimer's Association, so you can either contact me or contact them and we can work together on sharing resources with that. We had one more question in Spokane.
Thank you. As I listened to everybody discuss all these different areas of life together with Parkinson's, I'm looking for a resource that would help a lot of us in like a pamphlet that says, here's how you can start looking at the financial issues, the legal issues. I know I picked up the 5 Wishes from the hospice. That's an excellent resource. It makes us sit down, even though he may not want to, he is actually looking at it to say, at the end of my time, this is what I would like to have done. Do you know, Cindy, of anything for caregivers to read, to look at?
So we do have different booklets and books for caregivers that kind of go over those beginning steps. If you, and I do have at the Resource Center, it's not exactly what you're asking for, but I do have Hospice of Spokane gave us, it's a booklet that they actually give out with the 5 wishes, but it goes through and you write in with your family members your financial information, what you have, your wishes, where you would like to go. So it's almost like that living will or that trust that somebody's talking about, but it's less formal. But the 5 wishes that you just mentioned, that's something that's recognized now, and I want to say about 40 to 45 states as a legal document for somebody at the end of life and the services that they would like to. But I have both of those at the Resource Center, and I have copies of those, and I'm also looking for just what you just asked for.
Because some areas have funeral arrangements, just, like line items
Yeah.
down the road, and I think we're looking for that.
Yeah. No, and that's, yeah, well, and that is, I think, what we're talking about. It's just getting that conversation going. So, but contact me at the Resource Center. I know you get tired of this answer, but if I don't actually physically have something, it's my job to look for it. And so if you what I have there from the Hospice of Spokane. If it's not what you're looking for, then we'll try and figure out whether it's pointing you towards a elder care financial advisor, and it'd be great if it was all in one place. Working on it, but I don't know if we can do that anytime soon. But thank you, everybody. Those were many, many very good questions. I want to say thank you to Jill. We're going to give Jill our little Parky. I don't think that Jill has gotten one of these yet, so if you don't know about Parky, and I'll repeat it for everybody, Parky was... Well, our founder, Ed Ewell, went on a trip after he retired down to Antarctica, saw the emperor penguins and said, hey, they look like us, they move like us, and they have family, and they take care of each other, and they're always together. And so when he came back, he said that Parky, the penguin, needs to be our mascot. And so as we're always here to take care of each other and be part of a community, thank you for doing that today very much.
Thank you. Thank you for all your questions.
And so our offsite, you please stay on if you would like. I just have a couple more announcements here just really quick. I don't know if I want to put Lori on the spot really quick. Lori, would you like to come up just for a second? There's a program in Spokane. One of the types of programs that we get requests for a lot in Spokane is exercise for Parkinson's. Lori is with Touchmark here in Spokane, and in connection with what you do, next month, I do want to say, I almost forgot to do this, next month we are having a physical therapist, Ingrid Van Anroy will be here, and she's going to bring one of her partners at Gentiva, who's now been trained in the BIG program for Parkinson's. So next month it's going to be physical therapy and what you can do for Parkinson's, but also the BIG program. They have a bunch of certified individuals with that. But Lori has an exercise for PD program that's really great, and I give you a second to just mention a little bit about it.
Thank you, Cindy. We have an exercise program for people who have Parkinson's that is offered twice a week at Touchmark, and it's about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes long for each class. It's on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. We do have to charge for it because we have 2 staff people taking care of the class, and we have some equipment that we're using in the class. And it is a $50 per month class, and that gives you roughly 16 hours of 16 hours of class per month. And also, we plan to do assessments. Right now, we have the class scheduled as ongoing, but I'm thinking about having it be like an 8-week class that has the 16 sessions. 16 sessions. It would cover 2 months. So about 16 to 18 sessions right now in 2 months. So, and it's $50 per month. But we want to get the class full, and right now it's not. And so what I can offer at this time is that if you're interested in the class, please come and try it. We're giving like a 2-week free trial. And then if you decide that you like it, we'd love to have you. My background is that I'm a physical therapist, and I've been working on the wellness side with exercise for a number of years, since about 1997. And I have a certification as an exercise expert for aging adults through the geriatric section of the Physical Therapy Association. I've done a lot of continuing education as far as exercise, particularly for people who have Parkinson's disease. And one of the things that we're most concerned about with everybody that's aging and who has Parkinson's disease is fall risk, and I'm also a fall-proof balance and mobility specialist. So we'd love to have you. I have a flyer if anybody's interested in getting a flyer today. And thank you, Cindy, and thanks to all of you.
Well, thanks for letting me put you on the spot. Did you have any questions or anything else? Because otherwise, I just really appreciate you guys being here for April, and every time that you come. April is a beautiful month. Yes.
might just say that, try to speak clearly, not too good yet, but there is a class in town that's called Speak Out.
Thank you.
Eastern Washington University.
And there's flyers outside the door. Sorry to cut you off.
They don't have any participants right now.
Yeah, because it's a
Very fine class.
And it's no charge.
no charge, and it's a 4-week class, and so that's the reason that they have space is because everybody went through their 4-week course, and now it's open back up. There are flyers out as you go out, and for if there's anybody in our still logged in our outlying areas, they work in 7 counties around Spokane, and they can do the program via Skype or FaceTime. So it's a really good program, and if you want more information about that, you can contact me. Thank you.